A vague disclaimer is no one's friend. This podcast will look at episodes in relation to Buffy and Angel as a whole, and therefore contains spoilers for the entirety of both series. If you haven't seen all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel the series, go and watch them before you listen to this. Remember, you've been warned.
The hardest thing in this world is to live in it.
That's why there's us, champions. We live as though the world were as it should be, to show it what it can be.
The Earth is definitely doomed.
It's Tuesday, so it must be time to return to the Hellmouth. We're going through the Buffyverse episode by episode, and we'll look back at Joss Whedon's iconic show. I'm Emcee, and I'm here with...
This is Andie.
And this is David.
This is episode 110. It's Nightmares. It aired May 12th, 1997. The story was written by Joss Whedon, teleplay by David Greenwalt, and directed by Bruce Seth Green. Wow, we've got, I think this is the first episode where, we've got some heavy hitters on this one. I mean, This is the first one that Joss has done since The Harvest, so.
Right. And has Bruce Seth Green directed anything? I've lost track.
He did direct an episode a couple back. I can't remember exactly which one, but we have had him before.
And we'll see him again many, many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yes.
He's
I know.
definitely...
Yeah, he's one of the regular directors, so at least in the early show. I don't know if he lasted all the way till the end, but at least until season 3, I think. So,
I think so, yeah. He's... And I was going to point out, as we got to it, he does really good work. He's one of the ones where I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, this is definitely better than a lot of what we get sometimes in these early episodes. Mm-hmm. A much more cohesive directing style, visual style.
Yeah, this episode is very nicely put together.
Yeah, I was wondering, because Joss obviously wrote the story for this, and he did have the teleplay written by David Greenwalt, who is huge for Buffy and Angel. I really felt like this episode, while it's kind of a standalone, this is really building up to the finale more than I really think anything else we've gotten so far. I mean, we've gotten hints of what's going to happen in Prophecy Girl, but Nightmares is really almost like a character study before that happens. And I think that's mostly because of Joss doing the original story for this.
Right, and I mean, I'm pretty sure Joss did some cleanup work on a lot of these scripts, especially going forward.
Yeah, I know when Jane and Marty came onto the show, at the very least, they were saying that Joss had a hand in writing every single episode, and so it was probably the same way back during the first season. It's just they had such a turnover in terms of writers that I don't think that they did a lot of interviews where they were talking about exactly what kind of input Joss had and everything. But Joss had enough in this that he actually had a credit right on the story.
Yeah, and talking about the episode and actually Bruce Seth Green's direction, I found the visuals really memorable, and the contrast. The episode is actually really brightly lit.
Which is surprising considering how dark the episode is.
Right, it's an episode about nightmares, which you think nightmares, you think night, you think things that happen in, the darker times, actually the physically darker nighttime. And it had just such a bright and very clean look about it, but also a very heightened look about it. Like it really, gosh, what am I trying to say? It was a very it made a very dreamy episode. The way it was shot had this very disorientingly dreamy sort of vibe to it, which I really appreciated it.
Yeah, actually, there is one section where I find it the lighting and film quality to be quite variable. I don't know if you want me to discuss that now or wait till we get to it. Okay, well, it's when Buffy's dad, not her actual dad, her nightmare dad, shows up and comes to the library. That scene in the library, like the shadows there are really extreme. Like the shadows on Giles's face are not bright. Like that scene is not bright. And then when they go outside and have to talk on the bench, that is really like grainy looking to me. And
Huh.
one shot of Buffy's reaction is actually kind of almost out of focus.
Interesting.
It's
Oh, I
it's an
noticed that.
oddity there. I can think of, God knows how many reasons for that to have happened, but and if I wasn't watching it in the detail that we're watching it because we're doing a podcast, it would probably have gone right by me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I noticed that and it was like, oh, this looks off. So maybe it's just me, but I found that a little sort of, that's weird.
And I didn't notice that, and I think it's probably also the format one is looking at the episode through, whether you're actually just pulling it up on Netflix because you're too lazy to get up and pull your DVDs out. That would be me.
Right.
Or you're watching it on the DVDs, because I'm finding when I'm watching on my DVDs, because they're in, square screen format, which is what we all had in 1997,
yes.
Sometimes things are looking grainier than I think they probably did back on my box television back in the day.
That may be part of it.
But we're unfortunately losing Buffy on Netflix.
I was going to say, since you brought up Netflix, we got to give a moment of silence to that Buffy and Angel are going to be leaving Netflix in April.
And Firefly and Dollhouse and the X-Files.
Everything Joss, yeah.
And the X-Files, so
Yeah.
pour one out for the X-Files, too.
Yeah, hopefully they'll come back eventually, because Netflix has been known to do that, to bring stuff back if there's people asking for it. And it's possible maybe Buffy and Angel are leaving because they're planning to do some sort of 20th anniversary sets or something. I don't know.
Maybe, and I know that people have
That's
really
possible.
been complaining about the conversion of episodes
Yeah.
to Netflix. Like, they actually showed the rebroadcast version of Once More with Feeling on Netflix. It was
Ew.
not the full version with the extra 8 minutes in it.
Yeah.
So, and
Oh.
people have really been complaining about that. But Netflix has also stated that they want at least 50% of what's on there to be their original programming. So
Yeah,
I'm
they
hoping
are
somewhere
moving
like
over to that.
Amazon picks up the contract. Listeners, you can still find it on Hulu Plus if you have a subscription, if you don't own the box sets, because I don't want new generations of Buffy fans to miss out on the greatest television show ever produced.
And of course it is also available on like iTunes and things like that. So
I mean, I have 2 sets of the box set, or 2 sets of the episodes, but I
do you
host a
have
Buffy
like
podcast.
the individual seasons and then the big Chosen box set they came out with?
I do, yeah. I collected each individual season, and then my ex actually got me the box set later on. So.
I resisted the urge to get the box set. I really wanted to, because I think there's actually some extras on it that were not on the initial.
There's an extra disc, and it's not much to write home about.
Yeah.
It's just like an interview or two. It's nothing that's earth-shattering. It's just nice for me and my messiness to have a backup set of DVDs.
That's kind of the
So-
reason why I never got it, because I did collect the seasons individually. But eventually I'm going to have to upgrade it. Like, I've got discs in a couple of them that have, like, been watched too many times, so
Yeah,
they no
I
longer
think-
work.
My individual sets, some of times I'm like, oh, that's skipping. So I'll go find the box set and pull out those discs, because I have not watched them nearly as much, like physically watched them. So back to the episode.
Yes, back to the episode. Well, this episode is all about nightmares, and most of these nightmares are caused by Billy. Thanks a bunch, Billy. But the first dream that we actually get is just one of Buffy's prophetic nightmare things. And one thing I was wondering in watching her go into the Master's lair and the Master being in there, I was wondering, does Buffy, using her Slayer senses, actually know where the Master is, but she's kind of blocking it out consciously due to fear? Because obviously the Master is who she is extremely afraid of, and we will find out in Prophecy Girl that the Master is destined to kill her. So I'm kind of wondering, does Buffy know where the Master is, and she just won't allow herself to know it during, daytime hours until she's kind of accepted that the Master is going to kill her?
That's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, part of I'm thinking like part of that is a question of when we say it's one of her prophetic dreams, how prophetic are her prophetic dreams? Because, as we know, spoilers, the Master does kill her. And is this just, in her dream, it has to go the way it does for that part of their interaction that will come to be a prophecy in the dream?
Yeah. Well, certainly there must be some sort of supernatural element to it, because she knows what the Master looks like, even though she has never met him. So yeah, I am wondering if there is, some supernatural element to it, in that she knows where the Master is, but that since the prophecy has to go the way it's going to go, it can't actually happen until she's accepted that the Master is going to kill her. So I don't know. It was just an idea I came up with because I love coming up with ideas.
Right.
I know.
I mean, it's certainly a valid idea as far as nightmares are concerned. And that's sort of my question, is how much of this is prophetic nightmare? How much of it is just Buffy's own nightmare?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is something that Giles actually brings up later in the episode when they need to find Buffy because of the things that she dreams about. So,
I was just gonna say in that little just that short little dream she has about the Master, that her outfit is totally desaturated. Like, it's not Buffy colors. It looks like the Master's clothing in that same gray and black tones.
Yeah,
which I thought was an interesting choice, because Buffy, her clothing is very bright. It's very cheerful looking, and in that, they had her, at least for the first couple of seasons, then she has the, red leather pants and, things like that. And, and I think the costumers using that kind of stuff for contrast later on, too. But in this, her outfit was, grays and blacks, and her hair was 100% adorable. But the rest of it, very, very dark, very desaturated, I would say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Now, I think that's an interesting question, is, how much of the dreams we see are prophecy or mystical, and how much of it is Buffy's own psyche? Because, when later in the episode, when Giles said, "You never told me you dreamed of becoming a vampire," it's I'm trying to remember, she doesn't become a vampire in Prophecy Girl, right?
No, she doesn't. No,
right.
She's bitten, but
right. So that doesn't come to pass.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously an actual nightmare of hers, not a psychic projection.
Yeah.
So I suspect, I mean, it would be an interesting thing if this was, of course, real. There's no way to really tell, but it would be interesting if her nightmares were in fact a mix of prophecy and what's going on in her own head.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, because it's, fiction and we don't have all the information, we'll never know.
Yeah.
And you do get a lot of insight into Buffy's psyche in this episode, way more than you get with the other characters in terms of what their nightmares look like.
You get a lot from everybody, but definitely this is a Buffy episode. This is
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic character episode, getting to know everybody, because a lot of these characters are still real question marks to me, and we've gotten a lot more, and I have to give this episode a frickin' round of applause, because the first scene with Buffy and Willow talking, it passes the Bechdel test.
Yay! Finally.
Okay.
Finally.
Yeah, they are talking about a guy, but it's Buffy's dad, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, I don't think that counts either.
Yeah, this is the first time that Buffy and Willow have actually been together without Xander being there and having a conversation that does not involve talking about Xander or Angel. Or what's his name? I can't remember what his name is now. The kid from Never Kill a Boy on the First Date.
Owen Thurman.
Owen.
Yes. Yeah, they're talking about something that is not related to romance at all. It's something that's very important, and we find out a lot more about Buffy and her history, and we find out as many problems as we have with Joyce. She is so much better than Hank because he's the fucking worst.
He really is, and I think my perception of Hank is always going to be colored by what he says to her in her nightmare. Because and now that you've said it, David, I think some of the things that her dad says, one, are totally her feeling incredibly insecure, but I think some of them might be a little true.
Yeah.
Because he just leaves. We don't see him much, and I don't think it's because Dean Butler wasn't available all the time.
This,
not like he has a huge resume.
This is the first of 5 appearances,
Mm.
and of those appearances, only 2 of them are actually real appearances from him. The others are all flashbacks or dream sequences.
Mhm.
And they're all very short. Like, the only time you see him for real in this episode is at the very end when he's picking up Buffy. And then the only other appearance by him is when he's dropping off Buffy in When She Was Bad.
Mhm.
All of the other ones are dreams, or there's a flashback in Becoming Part 1, where you don't even see him. You just hear him arguing with Joyce, and they're arguing about Buffy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, obviously you would never want to think that a parent could think these things about Buffy, about their own child, not just about Buffy. But yeah, I thought that whole section with the nightmare with Dad is just, it's brutal.
Oh, it's
It's
hard.
those things
it's
that
terrible.
I think that every child, and especially a child of divorce,
Oh, absolutely.
would be so absolutely insecure about. And it's one of those standard insecurities that they bring up if you're, getting separated or divorced from a partner, that, you have to make sure you tell your children, this is not your fault, this has nothing to do with you. But if we take the episode way later, Normal Again, as any kind of canon, they've locked her up.
But of course, that's a tricky proposition.
And
but yes.
these things that he says is, I thought you'd turn out differently.
Yeah. I also find it interesting. It's like, maybe this is just more of a sort of storytelling issue, but it's like, in this thing we hear, oh yeah, my dad comes down on weekends and we do stuff. And it's like, we have heard nothing about Hank before this.
She said he comes down on weekends sometimes.
And the
Specifically,
way
sometimes.
Sarah Michelle Gellar says sometimes is heartbreaking. Just
Yes.
that way, that one word, sometimes. Like, it's breaks my heart. This episode is a lot darker than I remember it.
Yeah. And we do find out later that Hank was actually unfaithful to Joyce. He had actually hooked up with his secretary. This is something obviously Buffy doesn't know right now.
Right.
But it's something she will find out later. And he ends up, he moves to Europe, and she says he's living the cliche. Hank obviously wanted out of his family. He was probably midlife crisising, and everything that was going on with Buffy probably was not helping. And Buffy says even here, it's like the divorce was only finalized last year, but they had been separated before that. So it's possible that they had been separated even before the whole Slayer thing came up. And, they kept on going back and forth. It's just kind of everything that was going on with Buffy. I mean, you don't want to blame a kid, but any kind of stress on a marriage, especially if one that is already kind of in the process of breaking up, Buffy's issues might have been a straw on that camel's back. So,
I mean, I can totally headcanon it, and seeing Joyce is the one that was really standing up for Buffy. And Joyce has her faults as a parent, but I'm gonna, say that she moves, away to sort of start over. She's trying to support Buffy in that starting over, and she doesn't always go about it in the best way. Like, I do want her in parenting classes every now and then. She generally does try to engage with Buffy, to speak to her, to ask her what's going on in her life, and Hank just doesn't. He's just done.
Well, Joyce does mention reading parenting books and doing all of this other stuff just to be able to relate to Buffy. So I get the impression, if we're taking some stuff from the Buffy movie and some things that Joyce has said and what we see on the show. I think that Buffy's parents were like really wrapped up in their own stuff, and then all of these things started to happen with Buffy. And possibly them being wrapped up in their own stuff had to do with the fact that their marriage was breaking up, but they were kind of, it hadn't quite happened yet. And then when all of this stuff with Buffy started happening, it would not surprise me in the least if Hank had wanted to keep her locked up. Because we do know that Buffy was in an institution for a while. Hank might have wanted to keep her locked up while Joyce wanted to actually deal with the problem themselves. And that was kind of something that split them up eventually.
This is all reasonable speculation. I mean, the problem is we just have so little actual information.
Yeah, because we only see Hank twice.
Right. We never see Hank, and we never really get a sense of him, even from Joyce. I mean, what little we hear from Joyce is not necessarily the best, but there's nothing really...
I will say that Joyce does not shit talk her ex-husband very often.
No, she doesn't.
No.
Which is actually really a mature thing. And she's, even Buffy's like, oh, I forgot my bag at home. And she's like, it's not that big of a deal. Because I think Buffy's trying to spare her mom from having to see, her ex. And she's like, oh, I should have grabbed that bag before, and she's like, it's not, just come by the house. It's not, she's trying to be a reasonable mother. And you do even see them talking at the beginning of When She Was Bad.
And When She Was Bad, they're actually talking about how the parenting of Buffy trying to actually co-parent together, which is what responsible adults should actually do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
that's absolutely true.
Yeah, that whole section with Hank just absolutely, I think I cried a couple tears there because and Sarah Michelle Gellar was just... The thing she had to play in this episode, fear, anger, desperation, just she ran the gamut, and her fearfulness when she was with Billy, and actually her really kindness and the way she spoke to Dream Billy, it was very tender, it was very kind. She was all over the place in terms of her emotional life in this episode, and I think Sarah Michelle Gellar was just so good.
I mean, Joss is always talking about Allie Hannigan's gigantic eyes and how she can just portray heartbreak. But Sarah Michelle Gellar in that dream sequence with her dad, when he's telling her, it's your fault and I don't want to see you, just the heartbreak that's just in her eyes. And she just, there's just a few tears coming down. She's not sobbing or anything. But you can just see the glassy eyes where she just can't believe what she's hearing. And it broke my heart.
Me too. And I'm Buffy's biggest cheerleader. I think about the fact that her whole life has been uprooted. And we think about, this is sort of, things are pretty sunny still, tonally for the show. But there's this real underlying darkness, I think, in a lot of where we're going, and we don't really get as dark until Prophecy Girl, but a lot of these internalized issues have just really, especially in this first season, they really are very telling of who Buffy is and who she's going to be through the rest of the series. And I think that's why going back, a lot of these I skipped because I'd seen season 1 so many times, and going back really has given me a great amount of insight into who Buffy is.
Well, I mean, if you look at all of the characters' nightmares, there's kind of this, rising level of the badness of the nightmares. You have Cordelia kind of at the bottom, where Cordelia's nightmares are all just really funny. It's I'm not even on the chess club.
And we only see her twice. Right, we only see her when she looks in the mirror and she ends up looking like Rosanna Dana. Like Gilda Radley. I mean...
No, we do see her before that, actually. And I noticed in fact, we see her twice. She tells them about the history quiz.
Oh, yeah.
And then, and this is the interesting part, this is the first time since, episode 1, we've seen her be even decent to Buffy. When she's like, you don't know where class is. It's here.
Huh.
Huh, that is true.
That this is like the first incidence of decency on Cordelia's part in the whole series.
Well, I think decency might be going a little far because she was a little snotty at the time, and part of it was kind of...
Oh, yeah.
It was very part of the nightmare where Buffy needs to get to the class because she needs to take the test and she needs to, totally,
right.
fail the test.
So, but I mean, for Cordelia, it's decent.
Yeah. On the bell curve.
Yeah.
What I meant by only seeing her twice, we only see her nightmare twice.
Oh, yes.
We see her looking in the mirror, and again, her hair looks like Gilda Radner, Saturday Night Live, Roseanne and Anna. And then the second time she's being pulled into the chess club, and just those two little, because again, it is a pretty dark, this episode was kind of upsetting. But those couple little Cordy things, because of course her nightmares are completely shallow.
Yeah. And then you have Willow's nightmare. And Willow's nightmare is she has stage fright. I mean, that's not that huge deal.
I mean, it's actually, in a way, it's a callback to the end of the post-credit scene of the puppet show.
It is. I think actually they wrote that in after Allie did the ad-lib where she ran off stage. And they were working on this episode, so it's well, let's just write this bit in.
Yeah, it's a nightmare that comes up again and again. I've had this nightmare.
Yeah.
The stage fright nightmare, I've had it. But it's also, I think, Willow's fear of being seen or standing out.
They will deal with this a lot more once we get to Restless, which is
well,
very much a sequel to this, almost.
Right.
Earlier, she does say, and I think it's in relation to someone else's nightmare. She's like, I couldn't deal with all those people looking at me. And of course, that's what happens.
I also think it's really telling that her nightmare is not about academic failure. Buffy's nightmare, one of hers is, you would think, knowing what we know about Willow, even just this early on, that her nightmare would be about academic failure, but it's about being seen, it's standing out. And I sort of realized within that, as they're sort of breaking down these dreams, that she has total 100% confidence that she will not be an academic failure.
Yeah.
That she's not going to have that nightmare, even though that's what I kind of would have expected. Instead, Buffy, her first nightmare is about, not knowing there's a test. Again, pretty common. Because I think the nightmares build, obviously.
Yeah.
From okay to, ooh, that's bad, to really, really bad.
The only characters that have multiple nightmares, we have Xander, we have Giles, and Buffy. And they're the ones who all have multiple instances. With Xander, it starts out with him having the public nudity.
Right.
Yeah. And then we get his whole murderous clown phobia.
Right. And Nazis.
Very briefly,
Nazis.
we do see...
And that was another thing. I'm like, what is it about season 1 where they keep talking about Nazis in front of the nice Jewish girl? Because they've done this at least 3 times now.
Yeah, and it's never her that brings it up. It's usually Xander.
And she never reacts. And I'm like, really?
Well, it's the writers forgetting.
Right. No, I mean, of course, I understand the real world reason, but in context, it's just like, really? It's like, Willow, come on.
I mean, I don't think Xander's dreams really give you that much more insight into Xander.
No, they really don't.
It's being naked, he doesn't like Nazis, and he doesn't like clowns.
Well, the thing I found really interesting about Xander and his nightmares, he's the first one to be able to fight back against his nightmares.
He is. He and
which
Buffy
is
are the
not
only ones who actually defeat anything. And I did find
and Buffy never defeats her nightmares.
I guess that is true. Yeah, she defeats Billy's
nightmare.
Yeah,
she defeats Billy's nightmare, but Xander punches the clown in the face.
Yeah, I did find a quote from. Well, it was more of a note rather than a quote. Joss said that this is the episode where Xander really starts to grow up because he's able to defeat his nightmare. From this episode forward, he's gonna start to be less of he's actually going to become more of an adult. And one thing I do have to say on Xander is that there was only one moment in this episode where I thought he was gross. And
it's the thing with the teacher looking at the sweater. And that's my same thing. I put, because I do sort of a how do I feel about Xander note at the bottom of it, because we've talked about him so much. And I said, I have no real complaints about Xander in this episode, except for the grossness with the teenage lust over the teacher.
Yeah.
Yes, and I want to know if that's an Ed Wood reference intentionally. Because Angora sweaters are... Yeah. Basically, I hear Angora sweater, I go, oh, Ed Wood.
Angora sweaters became very, very, very popular again around this era of the 90s. I know I had several. They were everywhere, sort of. In that kind of Clueless era where you had the little skirts and the cute Angora sweaters. I do know that I had several.
90s fashion, Xander looked so ridiculously 90s with his plaid pants and the
I know,
the
it was adorable. It was adorable.
It was just like screaming out at me.
Yeah.
But yeah,
speaking of Xander, like when he does the thing with Willow where he, creepy crawly spiders and puts his hand on her shoulder with the fingers to freak her out. I'm like, oh, he is actually just 6 years old.
Yeah.
This is why he's like this. He's 6.
I found Xander and Willow's interactions throughout this episode really interesting because throughout the rest of the series, we've only seen Willow kind of pining after Xander, and Xander just being like, does Buffy like me? And in this, they're actually having fun with each other, and I can actually see, it's like, oh yeah, these two are friends. And not only are these two friends, they act like siblings in this episode towards each other, because Xander is doing that whole creepy crawly thing to Willow, which my brothers totally would do to me. They'd still do that to me today, honestly. And then when Xander turns up naked, or, in his boxers in the classroom, Willow's like, it was bad. It wasn't funny.
Yes.
Well, there's a hesitation before. It was bad. Like, I totally checked it out, but I'm sure that was really bad for you.
Oh,
that's how I interpreted it.
I don't think she was talking about wanting to check Xander out. She seemed to be on the verge of laughter, to be honest.
Oh yeah, no. She was about to say it was hilarious, but it's like it was bad. It was really bad.
Oh, interesting. I felt, again, people get to have different interpretations that we talk about it.
Yeah.
I thought the pause before bad was like, yeah, it was her thinking, it was really good. Thanks, naked Xander. And then she went, bad. But, it's just a different way to sort of read it, and it's not like a huge deal.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and since we're talking about Xander and Willow, Xander, as much as he drives me crazy sometimes, he is still utterly quotable, because it's funny if you're me. I still say that to this very day. Mm-hmm. It's such a great line.
It is. Xander does. He's very charming, and we've talked before, Nikki is incredibly charming as Xander, and I have massive Xander issues, but not in this episode. And even the sweater thing with the teacher, I'm like, dude, that's just a 16-year-old boy. Yeah. They're like, gross.
Yes.
I wrote it down because I thought it was gross, but it is just a teenage boy. And honestly, Xander, haven't you learned to not lust after teachers?
Yeah, you'd think he'd know by now, but no.
No, he's a teenage boy. He's going to have to learn that lesson 6 more times before it sinks into his brain.
He does ask Wendell if his love for spiders is platonic. Yes. I'm wondering if he was thinking about Mrs. French.
I did love that line.
Yes, it is great. We also know where he stands on the boxers versus briefs issue.
True.
So more information about Xander.
True. Was this? I think that was before boxer briefs got super popular.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Right around that time, you're getting a little bit. But so I sort of saw Xander as a boxers guy.
I did notice, and this is very shallow of me to notice, that Nikki is going to be working out a bit more between now and Go Fish.
Oh yeah,
because we do get that scene of him in the Speedo, and his chest is certainly a lot less defined than it is. episode. And I wonder if after he saw this one, he's like, oh, geez, if I'm going to keep doing this show, I better hit the gym.
Well,
Right.
but didn't Joss tell him to not get so buff?
Oh,
Because it was
that's true.
making him feel, and I'm sure they gave him plenty of heads up on the Go Fish episode that you're going to have your shirt off and you're going to be in a very, very tiny Speedo. I would have given someone plenty of heads up for that.
I would hope so.
You would hope so. So we talked about Willow's dream. We talked about Xander's dream and some of Buffy's dream.
We haven't talked about
Giles.
Giles. Yes.
Yeah.
Giles is actually, after Buffy, the person with the most serious nightmares.
Yeah.
I was trying to build up, and yes, we are now to Giles. Giles's dreams are all about failing in his duties. Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Getting lost in the stacks, not being able to read. This is all building up towards that moment where he sees the gravestone with Buffy's name on it.
Yes.
And, oh God, Anthony Stewart had just acted the hell out of that speech in front of Buffy's grave.
And contrast what he says about Buffy with, again, I know he's Dream Hank, but, he's so upset and he calls her so gifted.
Yeah.
She was so gifted, and contrast to what Hank in the dream had said is, oh, I wish you turned out differently. You're a disappointment. And so to Giles, she's not a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tony had in that scene, he really loves her.
Yeah.
And I think he's slowly, and it takes a while, and it's, all relationships develop. Prophecy Girl's going to shake him up a lot.
Yes.
And then it's going to keep going and going. But I think this is that moment where you're like, yeah, he loves her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he really, really honestly loves Buffy. And again, I thought that the second theme of this episode, obviously you have nightmares, you have things like that, but I thought there was a lot of, parental stuff in here as sort of the second theme.
Yes.
We learn quite a bit about parental relationships, obviously, with Buffy and Hank, but we also get this insight into how Giles feels about Buffy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Master and Colin sort of are in there.
Yeah.
Because the Master is very much, he's asking Colin questions. He's sort of pulling him out. He's educating him. He's teaching him, but he's also, like that student-teacher sort of relationship. So there's a lot of parental stuff in here, including Willow.
Yeah. The scene with the Master and Colin, when the Master is talking about fear and how he feels about the cross, that was amazing. Mark Metcalf did such a great job. It's so powerful for him to just grab onto this cross and to just see his hands smoking. And it's like, yeah, fear, like pain, can be controlled. And it just tells you how much of a badass the Master actually is.
He is.
Yeah. Also, I think it's like when he says we are defined by the things we fear. I think we've just gotten the Master's mission statement, basically.
Yeah.
That is what he is all about.
Definitely. Yeah. And just since we did bring up the idea of this being about parental relationships, now, this is definitely something that you see in hindsight, upon rewatch, but a lot of the stuff that happens with Xander, not with his nightmares, but in everything dealing with Billy, screams out to me Xander living in an abusive home.
Oh, yeah, and I think the show covers it a little bit. You get it here and there in the show, and I don't think they really ever fully address it.
They never fully address it. They do have scenes, like I mentioned Restless before, which has, elements of, sequelization of this one. In Restless, there is actually a scene where, I can't remember what Xander's dad's name is, but Mr. Harris is yelling at Xander, and you only see him, you see him huge, and he's like in shadows, but he's it very much seems like he's going to get into just like this screaming match with Xander. But he has the line when they're talking about a kitty league coach beating up one of the kids, and Xander's like, I'm just surprised it wasn't one of the parents.
Right.
And we mentioned Xander beating up the clown, but there's also the moment where he grabs the kitty league coach. Yes. Which they point out how heroic. And that is kind of the first time Xander has really done something heroic. And he looked like seriously mad at that moment. And he grabbed onto him and was not going to let him go. So while they don't ever fully address it, I really feel like it's seeded throughout the show that Xander is not going to put up with any sort of child abuse. And that might be because of, personal experience.
Yeah, and and we do get to see Xander's parents later, and they're really emotionally abusive alcoholics. I don't know if Xander was ever actually physically hurt. I mean, in the dream in Restless, his dad is very physically menacing at the top of the stairs, but we don't actually get a look at his face until later at Xander and Anya's wedding. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, looking at it in hindsight, you can see, and I know half the time the writers don't mean to put this stuff in, but, you look at the bigger picture. We're analyzing a show. Fans do this. That's what we do, is we sort of put sometimes more of a picture together than the writers have even thought of, so that makes us awesome.
Yeah. I do think that they knew that Xander's family was not going to be great. Because I think Joss didn't want anybody's family to be great.
No, he didn't.
He got attached to Joyce, and so Joyce became someone who tried really hard, even if she didn't always succeed. But even Willow's family, while she talks about how they just kind of glare at each other, her family is emotionally distant. And
that is exactly what my note says. It says we even get some background on Willow. And it's,
my note says, are they actually Jewish? Because
it did sound a little more waspy.
They don't bicker? What? I'm sorry.
Their mom's I think they're just very repressed.
I know, but that's maybe this is stereotypical Jewish families, but a lot of real Jewish families too. It's like, you don't keep your mouth shut. You really don't.
I don't know. I think those parents, the little we know about them, they're very academic.
Yes, that part rings true.
Yeah.
When we find that out. That
I think their whole point of having a child was to have this little perfect sort of version of themselves that, they're not very emotionally invested in her.
I remember way back in the day of, when Buffy was still on the air, probably around season 2 or 3, the main fanon for Willow's parents was that her dad was actually a rabbi. Which looking back at it now, it's like, they made her so, not really Jewish.
Dude, the Jewish thing with Willow seems very much like secular Jews.
Yeah.
No, I really don't get a deep connection to her sort of faith-based as,
I have to say, as much as, they have occasionally thrown in legitimate Jewish traditions for Willow, the one, I think I've mentioned this before, the one that resonated with me always was In the Body, where she leaves a rock on Joyce's tombstone. But they've never made her really actually Jewish in any way other than her name.
I think where the fanon actually came from was the episode Passion, when she's nailing the cross to the wall. And she's like Ira Rosenberg's only daughter, nailing crucifixes to her wall. And it's actually not a crucifix, it's just a cross. Yeah.
Okay.
My Catholicism coming out.
Right.
But because of that, because she specifically says Ira Rosenberg's only daughter, nailing crucifixes to her wall, and kind of the fandom stood up. The fandom stood up and said, "He must be a rabbi."
I know a lot of secular Jews who would be horrified if their kid put a cross or a crucifix up on their wall without actually being uber Orthodox.
Yeah.
Oh, right. No. This is that is fandom being not really very cognizant of how Jews work.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, for instance, they're like, apparently my grandparents, my mother's parents, were not religious at all. But my grandfather, for instance, would have never had a ham sandwich. Because you just don't do that. And it's not even a religious thing. It's a, oh no, like, it's not even Jews don't do it. It's a built into your brain. No, you don't do that. I think this is a similar thing with the cross, with Willow. It's simply no, like, yeah, Jews don't mess with crosses.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just became like huge fan, and for some reason, I can really remember that it's stuck out to me as something that happened way back in the days when dinosaurs ruled the earth and we were all on dial-up.
Right.
Dial-up.
I can certainly see a number of people thinking that, but as a Jew and, you know, person who knows lots of Jews, it's just like, no, it doesn't ring true. That is very much more a Ira Rosensberg's only daughter just wouldn't be doing this thing. Yeah. Because we don't do that.
And honestly, like, thinking about the writers, I don't think they had many Jewish writers ever on the show.
I don't know. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely...
Sorry, you cut out for a second there. I didn't catch what you said.
I said, just thinking about the roster of writers, I actually don't think that they had a lot of Jewish writers on the show. Who might know more about writing in writing a Jewish character other than just, you know, little tiny, you know, mentions of things. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of, you know, is neither here nor there in terms of this episode, but we've been talking about it anyways, so.
There's one funny line that I wanted to point out because of the way the line is structured, is when Willow's talking about the spiders, and she says, what do they need all those legs for anyway?
Yes! Yeah. I know exactly where you're going with that.
Right, and I was just like, bunnies, it must be bunnies!
It's really funny, actually, when you think about it, because Giles talks about how people's dreams coming true would be a musical comedy version of what is going on. And then in that, we've got a theory. There's the line, I've got a theory, some kid is dreaming, and we're all stuck inside his wacky Broadway nightmare. Yeah.
I love that callback. The other callback I love is they talk about why is Cordy so Evita-like? And then later on in Angel the series, she threatens her roommate, Phantom Dennis, with playing the Evita soundtrack.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I thought was really funny. That's just a... You know, no, she doesn't say it about herself. Someone else says it about her. But obviously Cordelia identifies with, you know, she's going to have that line in one of the episodes about, like, identifying with Marie Antoinette. And, like, she was just trying to give people cake. And I can totally see Cordy, like, loving Evita. But only the Madonna version, because she's, like, not that well-versed in actual theater. Yeah. Which, but, yeah, I just thought it was funny. And just the way Willow's phrasing is almost exactly like Anya's phrasing in the Bunny song. So I thought that was really interesting.
No, and I do, and I love how Wendell gets so upset when they refer to spiders as bugs.
When Giles is having the dream about not being able to read, Anthony Stewart had really delivered the fear Giles had really well. Like this confused, kind of stammering, he sounded helpless in a way that we had not had Giles sound before. And this was basically the first dream that we kind of realized was actually a dream, because the whole thing with the stacks was kind of layering. Very slowly, the dreams kind of progress until you actually realize what's going on.
Yes.
And so this was one of the first ones where it's like, wow, there's something really wrong because I read 5 languages and I can't read anything. And so Giles's helplessness really kind of stood out to me in that moment. And then it kind of gets called back again when he's seeing Buffy's grave. And it really, it hurt me to realize that both Giles and Buffy have dreams, have nightmares that will come true during the course of the series. Because Giles will stand over Buffy's grave at one point, and Buffy will have to dig herself out of a grave.
Yeah, that's a great reflection.
Yep. No, it's true.
It's going to be mirrored. You're going to see Giles's, and it's going to come up in a more funny way again. It very much reminds me of the episode Something Blue.
Oh,
when
yeah.
Giles loses his vision.
Yes.
But in this case, you can see the real fear, and in that one, that's one of my favorite episodes.
That one's funny.
This
that one's,
absolutely
don't
great.
worry, I have more scotch.
Right, and and it just shows the versatility of Tony Head, too, that he's going to play two very similar things throughout the course of this series, and just comedy versus tragedy, right? And sort of that. But yeah, Giles' nightmare. The other thing I think is so interesting is Buffy as a vampire is never brought up again.
No.
Right? It's one of her fears, and there's that part of me as a fan that's like, I always want to know more about slayers that became vampires that were turned.
That is such a fascinating thing for me. I've always been obsessed with the idea of slayers turning into vampires. And I think they might have done it in the comics. I don't know because I don't read the comics.
They have, but I believe it's been a while that the character that is turned, she does it on purpose.
Yeah, well, but
it's Simone Doffler or something like
yeah,
that, and I think she gets herself turned on purpose.
Yeah, I'd always been fascinated by the idea of this before it happened in the comics, and I don't read them, so whatever. But like, do they keep their Slayer strength, and do they get vampire strength on top of it? I actually, I wrote a virtual series for the longest time, and I actually had a former Slayer who was like we haven't talked about the Buffy formula yet, but there's always, and we'll get into it more in the second season when we'll start to see it, but on Buffy, you have a little bad and then a big bad. So, like, the little bad's like the first half of the season, and then the big bad will take over for like the second half. So I had this vampire slayer as the little bad in the first half of the season. So she was like super powerful, but also, she had the slayer strength, but she also had the vampire strength. But there was also like, she couldn't get along with other vampires because she was a slayer. So sorry.
Yeah, no, you'll notice that Buffy can't take on the ugly man as herself.
Yeah.
She can only defeat him when she's a vampire.
Well, I mean, like, as soon as she comes out of that grave, she never is out of vamp face. She's it's
right.
Almost like she can't not have vamp face. And because that's part of the nightmare. Part of the nightmare is that she is this demon.
They don't really do much with the vampire thing with her.
Yeah, the vampireness of it. All she says is, "I'm getting a little hungry."
Yeah,
right.
She doesn't actually really take on that many aspects of a vampire. You
hear her growl a little bit.
You hear her growl. She says she's getting hungry, but I don't. I never feel like she's gonna eat.
Yeah,
right. Well, one of the other Scoobies.
We never see her lose control at all.
Yeah. She's kind of a vampire the same way that the kids who get transformed in Halloween are vampires.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it is definitely interesting to see. They do like to turn their regular cast into vampires if they have the opportunity to change them back. Because we will eventually see Xander and Willow as vampires as well.
Right.
And when Diamond Select Toys was doing their Buffy figures, they certainly made the vampire Buffy, because it's like, we need to have Buffy as a vampire, even though this episode's a standalone.
Yeah, I think her fear of being a vampire it's more representational than the actual behavior of the vampire. It's just being the opposite of who she thinks she could be, and being a monster on the inside, which also plays back into her self-esteem, which is being so played out, her psyche being played out in her conversation with her dad.
Yeah.
You know, her dad basically saying, "Oh, I expected more from you. You're not a good you know." I think it plays back into that vampire, you know, her imagining herself as a monster, as a not good person, as someone that's not worth as much. Because poor Buffy.
Yeah, I mean,
terrible self-esteem.
Giles's dreams are all about, you know, failing in some way, losing control. And Buffy's dreams are almost all about failing and letting everyone down because she fails her test. She gets turned into a vampire, and if she gets turned into a vampire, that means she's lost a fight with a vampire. She dies, she's let her dad down.
Yep, no, it's all failure for Buffy. She fails as a slayer by becoming a vampire.
And even getting buried alive, that's all about helplessness.
And here's the trivia on that. Sarah Michelle Gellar is afraid of graveyards.
I've heard that, yeah, and she's afraid of being buried alive.
I actually have a quote that she says, "I have an irrational fear of cemeteries and being buried alive. It really is hard to be a vampire slayer when you're scared of cemeteries." And I know in the first season they were shooting in an actual cemetery, and then they built the cemetery set for the second season. I mean, one, because it was easier, and and you didn't have to go on location if you've got your set just right there. But yeah, Sarah Michelle Gellar was just really, really afraid of graveyards, and I think that's interesting. And I wonder if they knew that about her when they wrote the episode.
So, we've talked about how this episode is really dark.
Yes,
but we haven't gotten on to one of the darker elements of this episode, and that is the whole storyline with Billy.
Right.
Though it's a very important part of this episode because it is the cause of the entire episode. And I cannot believe when I was first watching this episode that I did not realize that, wait a second, this entire episode is based around a kid being beaten into a coma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and when you see the actual baseball coach and not the ugly man,
yes,
he's like the epitome of the banality of evil. I mean, look at that guy.
He's complete nebbish.
Totally. He's got, you know, nothing remarkable about him at all. He's a guy in a, you know, coach uniform, and he's like, "Oh yeah, just checking on Billy."
Yeah, well, I had a really bad thought when I was watching the fight between Buffy and the ugly man, and you see the ugly man's hand where it's just like this bludgeoning object where it's just something to hit, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, Billy was beaten with a baseball bat, and I can't believe it. Like, it's been 20 years and I didn't realize that until now. And
that's okay. There's stuff later on you guys are gonna laugh at me at because I didn't get them until like last year, but yeah, it's a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Club arm. Yeah, and I liked the kid that played Billy quite a bit.
I thought he did a decent job. He wasn't. He was very subtle in what he did. I didn't feel he went overboard.
He did look a little bit too much like the Anointed One, like Colin.
There was a bit of that.
Kids.
Yeah.
Now he didn't have to sit down the entire time to mask that he was growing.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering about the actual, you know, mystical reasons for why is Billy lurking around the high school. Because
I've been waiting for this.
Hellmouth.
Yeah. I mean, is there more versions of him, like, all over town? Is it the proximity to the Hellmouth? Can he sense Buffy, and that's why Buffy is the one who is able to see him through the episode until the end?
Yes.
Like, what's going on?
Well,
all of the above?
I'll give you your answer. The mechanics of the supernatural stuff in this episode do not work at all.
Okay.
It is I've got like question after question after question. Why does he usually manifest nightmares of people? But in only one case, he manifests the ugly man to beat up this girl in Sunnydale High. Why is he at Sunnydale High? Because this seems kind of initially confined to Sunnydale High.
Yeah.
And like, he's not a high school student.
No.
Why does he sometimes appear when the nightmares happen, but other times they don't. He doesn't. It's like there is no consistency to this at all. It is all down to we need something to happen, so we're just going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I was coming up with a lot of different reasons for Billy to be lurking around the high school. I mean, the Hellmouth is right there, so that might be the reason why.
Okay. That one... Yeah. That one I can go with. But
it could be the Hellmouth. It could be, they never actually address where he was beaten up. And at least around here, and I live in a town that's probably about the same size as Sunnydale, Little League teams will play wherever there is a free baseball diamond. So sometimes you will have Little League teams playing at the diamond near the high school. So maybe it was around where he was beaten.
I think in my community, not all of them, some of them have their own dedicated Little League fields, but in some of the more rural areas, or like the outskirts with less money, they do play at the high schools when nobody's using it.
Yeah. It's all a matter of scheduling, because all of that stuff tends to be done through like the parks and recreations. So they kind of don't give a crap like what school it's near.
But yeah, I think the question of why Billy's at Sunnydale High is probably the least problematic. The least problematic question of all my questions about what's going on.
And there's also like when they split up, was that because of the nightmare? Was that dream logic, or was that because I mean that just really stood out to me where it's like we got to split up and find Buffy, and it's like
right.
Haven't you guys been in this situation for 10 episodes now? How do you know you never split up? It's like the only way I could explain it was...
Willow comments on it, though. She does. She's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting, just between the three of us as doing this podcast together, I'm always the one that's like trying to dig deep in the psychological and thematic ramifications of episodes, because it's just who I am, right? And you guys are the ones that like are like, oh no, there was a thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, huh. So I think it works. I do think it really works because we can point out different things.
Absolutely.
I like to think I fall somewhere in the middle because
you are in the middle. You're sort of the mediator between the two.
Oh yes, no, I am a nitpicker. There is no question about that. But the thing is though, I freely admit that I didn't think about all this stuff the first time I watched this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm part of the reason I'm nitpicking is because I'm doing a podcast about it. So I'm actually like watching it and taking notes. And if I'm in that mode, I'm just like, okay, that doesn't make sense.
I didn't notice it the 20th time I watched it, so I think we're okay.
That's fine. That's the thing. That's why Buffy isn't. Yes, I've got problems here with this episode, but the fact of the matter is the reason that even this episode is a good episode is because if you're just watching it, this just goes by you. Yeah. It works.
I think
even
this is
though there are these problems, if you stop and think about it.
I think this is one of the strongest episodes of the season.
Oh, definitely.
And one that really does not get enough credit.
No, it doesn't.
Like, I forgot, this is a really impressive episode. And like I said, I really enjoyed the way it was sort of shot and Buffy's relationship with Billy. It was, and the thing centering around dreams, right? Because we're going to see that again and again, and not just Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is like a big thing in Joss Whedon's work. If you want to take the whole context, just not even Buffy, just what Joss Whedon does. He's fascinated with dreams and dreamlike qualities.
Yeah.
There's lots of dreams in Angel, which is part of the same universe.
Yeah.
Obviously, Restless is going to happen in a couple seasons.
Yeah. Dollhouse has quite a few dreams.
Right, and River Tam stuff in Firefly, even all the way up to, and it's not my favorite movie, all the Scarlet Witch sequences in Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
And I think it's because Joss is really fascinated with the psyche of characters that's revealed through their dream lights, the stuff that they don't say on the surface.
Yeah.
But the inside of motives. So it's definitely going to be a theme in his work.
Right.
everywhere.
Well, I was thinking, I mean, what Shakespeare play did he adapt?
Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of, there's a little, the psyche there is a little, there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I just looking at the list of episodes from the first season. I mean, we will definitely get into this more when we get to the first season wrap up. But Nightmares is probably in my top 4, if not higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It's really solid, and I don't think I realized until I watched it how solid it is and how impressive I felt, and really emotionally impact's this episode is. And I overall thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean it's a solid episode in and of itself, but it's also like this is the point where we're on the final road to Prophecy Girl.
Yeah, and this definitely building to Prophecy Girl.
This starts that road. It's like, for the Doctor Who fans out there, the end of new season 3 of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
When, you've got the story in the far future, which basically begins the story that goes through the next 2 episodes to the end of the season.
Yeah.
With the Master. So it's like that to some extent. I mean, I don't think it's as continuous, because this and the next episode and Prophecy Girl are kind of individual episodes, not a continuing story per se. I mean, this ends here, but it is thematically and in feel. This is like now. This is where we're going now.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I and it's been a long time since I've seen Out of Mind, Out of Sight, which we'll be reviewing next week.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe if these were flipped emotionally, it much more leads into Prophecy Girl.
Well, I think the way they do it is that this episode, this is setting up the characters for what's going to happen in the next 2 episodes. And with Out of Mind, Out of Sight, got to make sure I get it the right way around. There is elements of that episode that turn up in Prophecy Girl. So they're almost like a 2-parter, but, still separate. So this is kind of getting the characters into the right place for the finale, just emotionally, psychologically. So we should probably be getting into final thoughts.
They have a Wizard of Oz reference at the end.
They do have a Wizard. Well, every time that somebody wakes up from a coma, they have a Wizard of Oz reference.
You say that like when someone wakes up from a coma is like something that happens all the time on TV. It's
the only other thing I have is that it's always weird for me to see Dean Butler, who plays Hank Summers, because he was so much of my childhood that he was actually kind of a crush for me. He played Laura Ingalls Wilder's future husband on Little House on the Prairie, which was like huge in my house when I was growing up. So, and I think that's, I don't know, most people my age would probably recognize him from that, but nobody picking it up now as a 16-year-old would even give any thought of that, of that actual, relationship. But yeah, it's like Almanzo Wilder. And my other thing was like, the casting for Buffy's parents, sometimes you see parents on television shows and you're like, okay, how did that person come out of those 2 people?
Yeah.
But I can 100% believe that Sarah Michelle Gellar came out of Christine Sutherland and Dean Butler. Like, they really look like they're related.
Yeah.
Which was pretty great. You actually don't see that very often. You always see, like, the schlubby guy with the really hot daughter, and you're like, what? No. I mean, I'm not bagging on schlubby guys. I'm like a schlubby gal, so, it's not.
Yeah, no.
No, but it just, there are many times it just doesn't look right.
It just doesn't. Yeah. And in this case, they really...
And in this case, it does work.
Yeah, really, really good casting there. And I hate Hank. Hank fucking sucks.
Yeah.
He's terrible, and I know he's dream terrible, but I think a lot of it is truth. I think a lot of what...
I don't know. I have to say, I mean, I'm not going to say it isn't true because we don't know. But the fact of the matter is, so much of what he says strikes me. And granted, I am not the child of divorce, so this is not something I'm personally familiar with, but I certainly know many people who are children of divorce. This really does strike me as exactly the kinds of fears that children of divorce often have.
I mean,
yeah,
it's
like, but all of it seems like, and I hate to say this, but like standard issue children of divorce fears. It's like what I imagine. I could be wrong, but what I am there's nothing there that strikes me as specific to Buffy.
It definitely is, standard for children of divorce, but the fact that Hank does not show up again on the show, not, for more than just a couple of minutes. And the thing is, in season 5, he's got a young daughter with Joyce that he just kind of completely ignores. So,
yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a whole weird situation anyway.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is very much classic check your boxes of things that divorced children or children of parents that are getting divorced will be thinking and feeling. Absolutely. But it really colors every way I feel about Hank, probably for the rest of the series, because he abandons Buffy, and then by process he abandons Dawn. And Buffy's... Right. I don't know, and again, I think it also, the reason that Hank is so terrible is because then we can contrast it with how great Giles is.
Yeah.
And who's, not without his faults, he makes mistakes, but
Right.
Again, I said earlier, he loves Buffy, he loves her, and I can just, feel that. Their relationship is so central to my enjoyment and love of this program. So.
Well, actually, the next time we really actually deal with anything Hank, I mean, we see him before this, but in Helpless, he's supposed to take Buffy out, and he just, he can't be bothered to go. And Buffy, immediately, her action is to go and try to get Giles to take her, because she wants her real dad to take her to the ice show.
She does.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've given myself feels right before we stop.
I know, right? Also, my other note is Giles remains absolutely hot, so that's all I have.
That goes without saying.
I have to get the running commentary in there every time.
Yeah, I actually had posted on Tumblr the other day.
I know.
I was editing audio. I was like, do you know what? Andie and I just, will drool over Giles, and I'm sure David's just sitting there going, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to look at my watch. They'll get it out of their system in a minute or two.
I'll just sit here and think about Willow for a while. That's fine.
I posted a picture back at you of Giles being sexy, so, it is what it is. We all have our thing. Mine just happens to be Giles. Absolutely.
I mean, I can't say I blame you. Giles is terrific.
I know.
He's not my type, but he's a great guy.
He is a great guy. I do love the Ripper.
And seeing Giles again, as well as everybody else, except for one person, in the next episode, which is Out of Mind, Out of Sight. So until then, grr, arg.
Grr, arg.
Grr, arg.
We'd like to thank everyone who downloaded the podcast, and an extra special thanks to everyone who shared, liked, and subscribed on social media. If you'd like your questions or comments read on the show, you can contact us on our website, returntothehellmouth.com, on YouTube at Return to the Hellmouth, on Tumblr and Facebook at Return to the Hellmouth, on Twitter at HellmouthReturn, or on email at returntothehellmouth@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read your comments on the show. Be sure to rate our show on iTunes and Stitcher. Also check out Emcee's YouTube channel. See you on Tuesday for Out of Mind, Out of Sight.
Grr, arg.